Next up, by the way, if you need to get in touch with Mike or with John, you can email Mike at shaman@heliosinteractive.com. And I wanted to bring on Tyler Wilson. Tyler contacted me about, what is it, like a month and a half ago, and he's like, I work for Helios, and I create all this cool AR stuff, and come by the office and take a look. And then turns out he's a musical theater person and did perform Les Mis, and he's a lot of fun. But they create really cool projects at their office, and I thank you for bringing me into the office and showing me. I got to try out the HoloLens, which is a cool piece of equipment, but I'm excited for them to expand the field of view on that because it feels a little narrow right now. But I love what Helios is doing, and Tyler, thank you for speaking tonight. I'll bring you on the stage. Please welcome Tyler Wilson from Helios Interactive.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Andy, and thank you all for coming out. Yes, so I'm the UX designer at Helios Interactive. You can get in touch with me there, Tyler Wilson at heliosinteractive.com, or my personal website, skeletonologist.com, or you can tweet me at skeletonologist. Look, it's me. I wear hats, too. So I do user experience. So what does that mean? Well, I do wireframing and prototyping for all the applications that pass through our doors at Helios. So that's mobile apps, desktop apps, LCD and touchscreen LCD apps, augmented reality and virtual reality apps. And I'm also in charge of our usability testing and our user surveys. How did I start out? Well, in school, I studied forensic archaeology. So I was basically bones and reconstructing humans and remains and figuring out how animals and humans died via skeletal identification and injury classification. And there was a lot of data analysis and Fourier transforms and scattergraphs and boring things like that involved. And then I also have a minor in fine art with a lot of work in pen and ink, charcoal and acrylic, so you can blame me for all of the weird illustrations that are going to be on these slides to follow. After school, I started working at a 3-person nonprofit developing iPad software for archaeologists to use in the field. Because we were only 3 people, we basically all wore every single hat. So I was in charge of software development, I was doing software and graphic design, I was shipped all around the world to various archaeological digs to field test our software. I also handled our finances and did our taxes, and I was in charge of business development, and it was exhausting. Now my job is a lot simpler and a lot more fulfilling at Helios. Where I've surprisingly discovered that my past as an archaeologist and artist actually really helps inform me to make better UX for applications. Because at its core, archaeology is really just projecting yourself into the past to see how people lived and how they died. In my opinion, UX is just projecting yourself forward into the user journey and their perspective. Who would have thought? So let's talk about augmented reality, because I would like to help everybody here know a bit more about how to design great experiences. So what am I going to be talking about tonight? I'm going to be covering the difference between environmental design and interaction design, cues, the importance of color and text, adding weight and presence, how and when to innovate, finding what works, and the importance of empathy. So environmental design, what's your environment? Mike Shaman touched on that briefly. Your environment is your context. It's you looking through a window to an enhanced or augmented, reality that's before you, either through the screen of your phone or through the really teeny tiny limited viewfinder of your HoloLens. Your environment is important, and you should really consider that first before you go designing your app, because where people are going to be using your application or experience will really hopefully influence where your UI elements is placed, how much text you use, what color you use, things like that. Interaction design. Interaction design is how people interact with their context or environment. So within the window of your phone or the HoloLens, there exist media and objects that are available for people to interact with in a myriad of different ways. Pretty cool, right? What are people going to be interacting with? Well, the two main categories of augmented reality objects are 3D volumetrics. These are 3D objects that can be interacted with via light and cast shadows. And there's animated media. So that's flat, planar things, images, videos, basically 2D media, but gussied up all fancy for augmented reality. How can people interact with media in a context? There are some main gestures here that should be familiar to anyone who has ever tried to develop a mobile app. You can tap, you can swipe, pinch, rotate. There's that annoying air tap gesture that we were trying futilely to teach you all to use for the HoloLens. It's awful, and it's really finicky. If you do develop for the HoloLens, I recommend just making it gaze-based, where you look at something and then it clicks after a certain amount of time. It's a lot easier. There's also voice interactions. There's a hover state that I just mentioned for gaze-based interactions. And then there are facial expressions, like for Snapchat or Animojis, facial expressions that can cause interesting things to happen to the geometry or the environment around you. The other thing to keep in mind when you are interacting with your context is ergonomics. Think about how you use your device and how you want your users to use your device. Is it going to be a one-handed experience or a two-handed experience? Where are comfortable places to put your thumbs? There's a lot of really good writing out there about comfortable interaction zones. This should help you figure out where and how to place your UI elements, because nobody wants to get carpal tunnel. Bad news. So this app, Mike Shaman talked about, our Medtronic application, and some things to notice that he allowed me to point out very graciously were that there are simple and recognizable buttons. You want to make your buttons transcend culture and context, so use recognizable symbology. Don't use any colors that could be interpreted differently in other cultures. This is very important for localization. You also want to keep the experience familiar. So you'll see in this video, once we get to the 3D volumetrics part of the experience, oh, is this not going to play, really? Well, that's great. So there was a video here, and basically, when people are hovering over the, so here, I can do a song and dance, cool. Yeah, basically, you want to keep interactions and instructions on screen as often as possible for new interactions so that people are, they have a sense of place and context so that they don't go, why am I in this app? What am I doing? Cues. Cues are visual and auditory clues that can inform the user what elements are designed to be interacted with, how to interact with them, and what things in the context can be interacted with. First off, visual cues. Visual cues are using on-screen UI like arrows and radars and buttons to show people what things can be interacted with. The importance of visual cues is really, think about your phone, think about your computer. It's a 2D plane, right? Augmented reality, it can be all around you. It's a 360 space. You want to use visual cues to help people look all the way around your space because they might miss really cool things like giant squid. Who wants to miss a giant squid? Not if you worked on it, right? Other important things about visual cues, specifically if you're doing kind of a Snapchat or emoji style application, you want to make your gestures really easy to learn and understand. So things like opening your mouth, winking, do gestures that are easy to discover and use and repeat. If you don't tell people about them explicitly, don't make them make or break features, but make them easy enough to discover that they will add delight and wonder to your experience for your users. Maybe this next video will work. Over at our little demo table over there, we created an application for Cartoon Network that is about the Ben 10 alien experience. It's a kid's show. It's a kid. He's got a bracelet. He transforms into aliens. It's pretty cool. So this was actually two applications that we kind of smushed into one mobile experience. There is a Snapchat style face switching piece, and then there is an augmented reality game. Some things to notice during the Snapchat style facial transformation. It's best to give people guidelines so that, if they move their face out of frame, they'll know how to easily get their face back into frame to have the biggest chance of interacting with however you're switching their face. And again, re-emphasizing all of those simple gestures, opening your mouth, winking. Don't make it something weird like, people who can turn their tongues into loops and wiggling your nose and things like that that aren't really common or noticeable. Oh, great. Are you going to play? It should autoplay. Tech people? Can we help? Is it going to work? No? Great. Cool. So this is me, and I have my face there transformed into an alien. Really simple geometry on that facial mask. That's something I'm going to come back to, how much geometry to use when you're doing augmented reality experiences. Your developers and Unity creators are really going to thank me for that, by the way, because you don't want a million polygons. Other good things to notice are the UI elements. They're large, they're brightly colored, and they're at the bottom of the screen. That goes back to what I was saying about ergonomics. A lot of design trends nowadays are moving important user elements down to the bottom of your phone screens and tablets, because as phones get larger, it's easier to reach UI elements at the bottom of your phone screens. This next slide is going to lead to another great still image, so lucky us. This is going to be the augmented reality game portion. So here, you're holding your phone landscape. You have a chance to become a Ben 10 branded alien. You see the alien arms, and you get to shoot little alien spaceships that are all around you. Some cool things that you would have gotten to see if you actually come over and view at our table. You should do that because it's really fun. There's a nice big reticle in the center of the screen so you know where you're aiming. There's also a double reinforcement strategy of the UI, specifically around where the enemies are placed. So not only do we have a big, if you're a video game player, we have a big radar on the right side of the screen that shows you, oh, great. So yeah, there's a big radar right there on the side of the screen that shows you which direction you're facing and kind of your field of view. That's in that green highlighted area. And if this video would play, there are also arrows that are yellow that follow you around and that constantly point you towards your enemies, because we want people who may just be overwhelmed by, what am I doing with this phone? Why are there arms? We give them 2 chances to figure out that there are enemies all around them. Sound cues. Sound cues are another way, like visual cues, that you can encourage people to know what to do in your app and how to interact with your application. There are big friendly grizzly bears that you wouldn't want people to miss, so make them talk. Use directional sound. Even if people are using headphones, you can still use A/B or right-left sound cues to show people that, hey, there are cool objects all around you. Color and text. Print and mobile conventions apply. If anybody here is a designer, you probably know 2D design conventions about complementary colors. This is a color wheel. It's really important. Complementary colors are things like green and red, orange and blue. On the opposite side of the color wheel, those colors have the most contrast when shown together, making them easier to see. You want to use colors that reinforce users' action. So this goes back to localization and context, but green, at least here in the United States and parts of Europe, mostly means go or okay. Red usually means stop or you did something wrong. Blue has been shown to be the color that people associate with the future, so use a lot of blue. Don't make people bleed from their eyes. That's really, that's a point, if you remember anything from my talk, don't make users bleed from their eyes. Text, so here you can see 2 examples. That blue text down there is very hard to read. That red text, it's a lot easier to read. General rule of thumb, dark text on a light background or light text on a dark background. Also think about how much text you're using. Do you want people to read a novel when they're interacting with your app? Probably not, unless you're actually doing an augmented reality novel. Use text sparingly. Think about how much text you'd use in the general mobile experience. Use that amount of text or less. This is going to be another great still slide that you people are going to get to look at, but we worked on a HoloLens application for the Warriors. This was for the groundbreaking for their new stadium here in San Francisco. And using the HoloLens, we let people explore a miniature 3D model of the HoloLens of the Warriors Stadium with big, easy to see point of interest icons that would show images and videos of what the whole stadium would look like when it's complete. Things to notice, the model of the stadium was rendered mainly in neutral tones of gray. The point of interest icons were rendered in really bright, eye-searing yellow to make them easy to see. They were also placed all around 360 degrees around the stadium, thereby forcing users to explore their context and walk around to see the stadium from all angles. Other great things to notice, well, maybe you probably won't, but we had very little text in this app. Believe me. So yeah, great. Yep, there's the back of someone's head, and that's what the back of your head looks like when you wear the HoloLens. You're welcome, world. Next, adding weight and presence to your augmented reality experiences. How do you make your objects look real in a real environment? Playing with light and shadow is a really good way to do that. You have 3D objects, you want to make them real, add shadows to them. But you want to make sure that you add shadows that don't contrast with the context that people are in. So think about where we are right now. Everybody look above you. What is there? There are lights, right? Where is light happening usually? Probably directly above you. So when you're lighting your 3D objects, talk to your Unity engineers, talk to your Unreal devs, whomever they are, and tell them to place your light sources for your objects directly at 12 noon above you. Because if they place them, say, at the 3 o'clock position or the 6 o'clock position, unless you know that your users are always going to be viewing the application at, after lunchtime or at 6 a.m., most likely they're going to be inside and the light is going to be coming from directly above them. Innovate in small doses. Nobody wants to feel lost or afraid or scared when using an augmented reality application. So this is pretty easy, guys. Just make buttons look like buttons. Don't make them talk to you. Don't make them drippy with eyeballs. That's weird. No one knows what to do with that. Just make buttons look like buttons. Give them clear call to actions. Label buttons with what they do. It's even simpler. Use known mobile gestures. Remember all those gestures I talked about that people who use phones every day, like everybody here uses? Tapping, swiping, rotating, pinching. Use those gestures. Reinforce them whenever possible so that people don't feel lost. Make sure there's enough familiarity to not scare away people so that they want to keep coming back to your app as often as possible. We did another application for Salesforce at their Dreamforce 2016 conference. I think that's actually happening now, so deja vu. So we did 2 experiences for them. One was an augmented reality assembly line using the HoloLens. The other one was a photo opportunity that would make you and your friends look like Albert Einstein, because who doesn't want to feel really smart and discover gravitational waves? Things that you won't get to see, but trust me, are there. For the HoloLens, we had a really big, gigantic call to action button that said air tap to start. And even then, we had to have brand ambassadors, people paid by Dreamforce to stand next to you and to walk you through how to air tap with the HoloLens. So again, pitfalls, things to look out for when you're designing for HoloLens. Teach people how to air tap or just use gaze-based interactions. For the photo op, again, we used large, simple geometry, like I was talking about for the Ben 10 application. And at the end of the video here, there was a guy that threw up the devil horns, and it was funny. But you can't see him. He was wearing a lab coat, and he really did look like Einstein. It was super fun. So find what works. How do you do that? Well, one of the favorite and best things that I do around the office is usability testing. So that's bringing in people who don't work for our company, random strangers, people I've never met before, children, whomever, depending on the app, and just running them through what we're going to be releasing. So an example of why usability testing is important. For the Ben 10 application that is demoed over there that you guys couldn't see, so that was the app for Cartoon Network with the facial transformation alien masks and the shooting aliens all around you. We actually found out that the first facial tracking software that we were using had a lot of trouble with darker skinned people and people with really big Buddy Holly style glasses. So once we found that out, we had to go back to the drawing board and get a new facial recognition software that thankfully was a lot more forgiving and easier to use for all of our users. Another good thing, or rather anecdote from the Ben 10 stories, is tailoring usability tests to suit your audience. For the Ben 10 experience, I actually had to talk to a lot of children. Thank you for all my coworkers who had families who let me harass their children for a day. It was exhausting. But basically, I had to make sure that kids could read and understand, and more importantly, be comfortable answering all of these usability questions. So some general rules of thumb when you are asking people questions: don't ask questions that can be answered with a yes or a no. That doesn't necessarily tell you anything. Binary answers aren't going to tell you something. Instead, be like a journalist, ask leading questions. Ask who, what, why, and how. Pretty soon, you'll be getting them writing paragraphs in response to your questions. Those are a lot more interesting and substantive. Empathy. Empathy is probably the most important thing that I do as a UX designer. In a nutshell, it's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Like I was talking about before, archaeology, I was putting myself in the shoes of ancient Egyptians, Grecians, Romans, Turkish people, whomever. Now it's my job to figure out, people who go to auto conventions and sports fans and myriad of people. So empathy is not only great for you to make you feel good as a designer, but it also saves your company money. By you extrapolating people's needs before they have them, you can save your designers time, you can save your developers time, and ultimately you can save time after your apps go live, because hopefully there will be less bug reports and less, world-ending crashes once people realize that, oh, they didn't think about what happened when I tapped the home button 5 times, and that crashes the app. Long and short of it, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Your company, yourself, your developers, your users will really thank you for it. So what did we discuss tonight? We learned about the differences between environmental design and interaction design. We learned about visual and audio cues. We learned about color and text and how to not make people bleed from their eyes. We learned about weight and presence through lighting and shadows, finding what works through usability testing, and the importance of empathy and viewing your experience as someone else. So if you're not working in augmented reality, but you're curious about it, how exactly should you find out more? Well, medium.com is a great venue to go to. It's a free website. It's a design, art, culture blog. It's an aggregate service. They're great. I recommend also just reading technology news. Read about new hardware. Read about hardware trends. Read about how much people hate the new iPhone notch. It'll make you sound a lot smarter when your client says, but I want facial recognition. Oh, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Talk to interesting people. Talk to people who have nothing to do with design. Talk to actors, talk to lawyers, talk to doctors. Anybody that you talk to is adding information to your internal corpus, to the people that you can envision yourself being when you look at the app through their eyes. Remember, you don't have to have a design degree to be a great designer. I think I'm a pretty good example of that. In addition to that, I kind of took a couple months, but I have started posting articles on Medium at my personal website, skeletonologist.com, because I can't let go of the bones. My first article was about my personal journey from archaeologist to UX designer and how I hope I've impressed on you all that archaeology and UX really aren't that different. I also wrote a piece about holistic user experience and how UX is literally everything that you do all day, all the time, from waking up in the morning to going to sleep to when you roll over in your grave. It's all user experience because people have designed things in life to be used by people. That's what we are, and that's what we make. I had a case study that is, we designed a multiplayer VR game where some of the players were actually using mobile apps alongside the single virtual reality player. So that was the pitfalls and tribulations that we learned going through that experience, and the client ended up loving it. And the most recent article I wrote was a workflow for creating and sharing virtual reality UX prototypes with clients, because I swear every article I see on Medium is a new way for you and your designers to get into a room and draw stick figures, and that's not what clients want. Clients want a way that they can visualize a real experience with simple shapes that actually have written comments that people can read and then refer back to. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Andy. Feel free to reach out to me through all those things. Yeah, and come over to our demo table. We have cool stuff. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I left the mic over there, the other mic. You said, oh yeah, the orange. Okay, so our first question right here. Great job, by the way, Tyler.
Hey, Tyler, that was awesome.
Thank you.
So earlier on, I saw the demo from Medtronic, was it?
Yep.
And I saw a really cool switching between an augmented reality-based user experience and a predominantly mobile-based user experience, something that we're classically used to. And that's sort of a switching between one app UI and another. Are you guys exploring switching between AR and VR? And if so, how do you guys think about that user experience?
We have not had any clients ask for that specifically, but I know Microsoft and various other tech companies are they're developing kind of the MR, mixed reality thing, where it's basically a virtual reality headset that has a front-facing camera, so you can, look through it and you can see the real world. I think that's a very cool space to be in. It might be more disorienting than either straight virtual reality or mixed reality, because if you're in a virtual space, you have to think about how then do you see the context that's around you. And then you have to think about different interaction paradigms, like if you're using a Vive headset and you have controllers, how do you stop people from trying to reach into the real world, or do you want them to reach into that real world context? It's an interesting question. I don't think there's a hard and fast answer yet.
As you had that one presentation about looking at a magazine, and you're saying, I want to see more information or more depth to this information, so show me some more stuff. So in his question about switching to VR, if you use a point source and you're adding another layer. So you're saying, I'm in this point, now I'm going to go into a virtual space, and it just expands this whole thing, but it's still relative or associated with your physical location. So I'm just throwing that out there for someone smart to do on the weekend.
So that's great. Yeah, and apps like Google Tango and things like that are location-based, that's a great way to really do that.
Hey, when you get into the usability testing of AR, what are like the top 3 most common pitfalls you encounter?
That's a great question. So what are the 3 main common pitfalls when you do usability testing for augmented reality? Ooh, wow. That's a great question. Probably assuming that people know what to do. So, you ask them, how did you find this button? And you're assuming that they can even find the button. A lot of times, people really have to be forced to, again, see the whole context that they're in, look around, and see all of the UI. Other things are, another pitfall is, Yeah, tracking. Tracking is a good one. Thanks, Andy. People, losing track of where they are in the augmented reality experience. So, either you don't have enough UI to properly show them where the rest of the experience is, or they just get really interested in a certain part of it, or maybe you don't make a way in your app for it to transition back to zero, meaning they zoom in really, really big on a 3D object, but there's no way for them to easily make things, comfortable again and zoom back out. So people tend to lose objects fairly frequently.
Yeah. I think that's that's good, because we're going to go more into detail with a lot of the things to pay attention that combine the technicals and also the UX part of things. Man, you have to make it complicated. Pass the mic. Yeah, actually.
Okay, so Tyler, that was awesome. And I can see all the work that the UX designer does. And I'm wondering, what about the customer discovery process? What about when you have an idea and you're wondering, okay, how do I get inside my customer's head in order to do something that they need and they value? Can you talk about that customer discovery?
That's a great question. That is one of the things that we're definitely still, the question was, how do you get into the customer's point of view when they have an idea? How do you basically show the customer what's possible? How do you demo to them what they're thinking? There isn't really a good answer for that yet, unfortunately. There aren't really purpose-built applications for easily prototyping UX flows in augmented reality or virtual reality. Things that I've experimented with personally, I've done a lot of 2D sketching. So, you draw a cube and that's supposed to represent the context that you're in. And then you place other volumetrics or flat, lines in that space. But again, that's not really it, because how much, trying to get people to wrap their head around a 3D volumetric area by drawing it in 2D space, doesn't matter how good of an artist you are, it's hard to translate 2D into 3D. That last article I wrote, not to plug myself, but it is a possible solution, because this is a frustration we've faced a lot, is we've experimented with designing really basic user flows in Unity. So you have like basic shapes. You build a person and that's just a cylinder with a sphere on its head. There are a lot of free plugins where you can export Unity scenes into 360 images. And then there is a free online alpha application called Vizor.io. That's Vizor.io. And they basically let you, if any of you are familiar with like Framer or InVision or Adobe XD, name your prototyping app of choice. It will let you basically make hotspots where you can connect those 3D scenes together, and it will let you place text notes so you can describe interactions, UI elements, how things happen. Again, there is no real perfect solution. Paper prototyping is also a great method where you get pieces of cardstock, you write, this is a menu, you draw a button, and you just have people stand around in the space, and then you photograph it, or you just walk the client through maybe what the space is going to look like. Again, it's still very much an evolving question.
Hi, okay. I can't really see you, so I'm gonna stand up. Hi, I'm Melody. So a common principle of the traditional design, at least, is that good design is not noticeable.
Sorry, could you start from the beginning?
So a common principle I've heard in design is that good design is not noticeable. Do you think that principle also applies to AR?
The question was, one of the main principles of good design is that it's invisible, and how does that carry through to augmented reality? I would caution making your designs too invisible in augmented reality to start. It is so new, people get lost, they get confused. With the HoloLens, you can see that people don't even know how to interact with them. I recommend being as transparent with your instructions and design and interactions as you can. Give people as much feedback as possible, whether it's putting focus rings on buttons so that when people look at things, the elements highlight. If there are, if people can pinch to zoom, if people can pan the scene around, have those gestures appear on screen when people touch the screen. You really need to do, I would say you need to be more hand-holding than withholding when you are designing for augmented reality. Because again, it is such a new medium that even if you do use familiar gestures, people just don't know what it is yet. That may change once the technology improves, once it becomes more ubiquitous. Who knows what the future holds.